legally what they're due. So let's give a big hand for Steve Patrick.
Thank you. Did everyone get one of my cards yesterday? If not, then they're here on the front desk, and feel free to grab a couple. What do I know about lead and asbestos? Well, can't even say it, asbestos. I went and took the classes. I took the classes that the feds gave so that you can become certified. And I did that when I was an adjuster because, heck, I never knew but what I might end up having a claim that might have lead or asbestos. And if I had somebody wanting to spout nonsense to me, I could be able to say, no, wait, I took the class and I know what it says. And so that's why I took the classes. So I recommend that you go out there and take the classes, take the water remediation classes, become certified in all these things. If nothing else, it shows that you're a person who really cares about your industry and your craft, and you want to hone your own skills and be able to know all these things at an in-depth amount. Smart estimates is a term that I coined. I find that sometimes PAs and contractors try to frustrate adjusters. And why would you want to do that? Wouldn't it be smarter, as Chip was talking about this, wouldn't it be smarter to rather make their job easy and make it easy for them to say yes to you? I mean, if your objective is to get a yes, then why not grease the rails and make it easy for them to say yes? And the way that you do that is with facts and evidence. We talk about this. Document, document, document. Documentation is king. That was Chip's whole thing this morning. Documentation is king, right? And you want to get all your facts and evidence, preferably objective third-party source material, all together. And these smart estimates, inside the notes, you're going to put a bunch of the facts and evidence right there inside the estimate. And I'll show you how to do that. Again, we talked about this yesterday. Everything that I'm going to discuss is based on legitimate damage and reasonable methods of repair. So please don't, I'm sure no one in here would do that, but please don't use my stuff to go out there and try to get illegitimate things bought on any losses. Let's be transparent and honest and do the right thing at all times. Horse trading. All right. My business partner Tony's from West Texas, and so he uses lots of stories and metaphors, and he tells the metaphor, if you're wanting $1,000 for a horse, then how much do you ask for the horse? More than $1,000, because if you start at $1,000, there's nowhere to go but down. Likewise, if you're the buyer of the horse, are you going to start at $1,000? No, because if you started at $1,000, there's nowhere for you to go but up. I mean, negotiation 101, right? So, if you're putting together an estimate, it's a $10,000. If you believe that the true amount to indemnify the insured from this loss is $10,000, then are you going to write it for $10,000? If you do, there's nowhere for you to go but down. So is there a way to put fat in the estimate so that once they cut out all the fat, you're left with the meat, which is the $10,000 where you wanted to be? Is there a way to do that and have all the fat be legitimate and reasonable? Yes, there is. And that's the way you want to do it. You want to have some fat in the estimate that they can cut out. However, you want every single line item in there, like Chip said, so that you can justify every line item with a straight face. That's exactly right. Every single line item is legitimate and reasonable. Am I willing to cut out some of it? Like, for example, residential supervision or commercial supervision, right? Is that legitimate? Of course it is, especially if they've hired a general contractor. Is that something you're willing to cut out to come to an amicable agreement? Sure it is. Absolutely. If we can come to a settlement agreement and hit a number that's pretty close to where I believe it ought to be anyway, then sure, absolutely, cut out some fat. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Smart estimates are estimates that you create that leave not a single legitimate and reasonable line item off. You don't leave any money on the table at all. Every single thing is in there. A lot of things that you don't typically think about, you're going to start including in your estimates. All right? Estimates that get you and your client significant results, chock full of documentation justifying each line item. Every single thing in the notes. Right? Now, if you're going to use Xactimate or you're going to use IntegraClaim, the old MSB program, or SimSol, or one of these estimating programs, on the cover sheet there's a place where you can put your opening statement. So this is the opening statement I have in this. Notice that I have all rights reserved. I copyright my estimate. Why not? Can people make copies of my copywritten estimate without my permission? No, they cannot. We have written this estimate based on legitimate damage that we observed and that we consider to be a reasonable method of repair. We believe that every single line item contained in this document is legitimate and reasonable, and some are even required by code. If you determine that any line item here is illegitimate or unreasonable, please let us know how you drew your conclusion. We may very well agree with you. An answer of "we do not cover that" or some equivalent answer is not acceptable to us or our client. Please explain how you arrived at your conclusion that it is either illegitimate or unreasonable. I look forward to arriving at a fair and equitable blah, 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 blah. You like that opening statement? Well. Right? Okay. So, remove laminated shingles without felt. Line item 6, remove roofing felt, 30 pound. How many of you guys have ever included a line item for removal of felt? If your hand is up, then you created it, because it is not an Xactimate. It does not exist in Xactimate. So the gentleman that was going to be teaching this session right now, Ray Choate, he and I were doing an appraisal together. Very first time I ever met Ray. I was doing an appraisal for the carrier, and he was doing for the insured. And he had that in there, and I said, Ray, I said, you were using the line item. I said, all you have to do is use the line item, remove shingles and felt, and the felt is included, remove shingles and felt. He goes, nope, it's not. I said, what do you mean? He says, if you look carefully in Xactimate, remove shingles with felt, remove shingles without felt, it's the same price. How, and he asked a very good question. Remember what I was telling you yesterday, ask questions? How can it be the same price if you're doing the additional labor to remove the felt? You have to have the extra room in the can, the dumpster, for that extra felt. Picture a pallet of felt sitting there, right? And now it's not in tight rolls anymore. So you have to have a dumpster that hold all that extra, plus all that additional weight sitting on that pallet, going to the dump and being dumped. None of that stuff is included in Xactimate's price. And you know what? He was right. He made a compelling argument, and he backed it up with facts. And so guess what I did as an appraiser when he did that? I agreed with him because he made a compelling argument. You know what, Ray? You're right. It can't be the same price. It's not possible. So therefore, I believe that this line item is legitimate, and we're going to include it in this appraisal. And he got results. So, this is a write-in. This is a write-in estimate. So, where are you going to come up with the price? Well, ask a contractor how much it costs. Do a little research and find out, and then all of a sudden, so what you do is you create a macro. How many here of you guys use macros? Let me see your hands. Well, hold up your hands. If your hand is not up, you are wasting a lot of time rewriting the same thing over and over and over again. So what I do is I have a wind macro, a residential wind macro, I have a commercial wind macro, I have commercial macros for metal roofs, for built-up roofs, all the different types of commercial roofs that are out there. I have hail macros, I have residential fire macros, water loss macros. So all I've got to do is copy that macro, put this client's name on it, and then change the room sizes around or whatever, redo the rooms. And I've already got everything in there. So then with the macro, what you do is you go in and you delete all the line items in your macro that aren't applicable to this loss, right? Because it's chock full of everything. So you delete the line items that aren't applicable, and what you're left with is the line items that are. And then all that's left to do is enter your quantities. So many linear feet of this, so many square feet of that, and check over your estimate and you're done. Brian.
On tear-off, I've gone in, and if you look at codes, there's basically a defaults to a demolition code.
Correct.
Instead of a skilled roofer. I'm using skilled roofers, so when
Y'all know what he's talking about? If you go in... Tear off shingles, line item, tear off laminate shingles, 3 tabs, whatever, okay? And you click on the unit price, it opens up a dialog box that shows the guts of how they come up with that price, right? It shows the actual labor costs and all those things. And instead of having the roofing trade tear off the shingles, they have the demolition crew tearing off the shingles. The price that an unskilled demo crew charges for demolition versus a skilled roofer tearing off for demolition are 2 very different prices. So Xactimate has been sneaky, and they put in the less expensive demolition crew doing the tear off, which means your tear off price is well below true market rate. So what Brian is talking about is he goes in there and he changes that to roofing. And how do you know that that's legitimate? Because you have the drop down thing. You click on the little arrow and it drops down all these options, and he goes from demo to RFG. That's how you know it's legitimate, because Xactimate has the drop down box that makes all those other things available. So on your notes, you're going to make a note of that if this wasn't legitimate, then Xactimate wouldn't have made the possibility there for you to be able to change it from demo to RFG.
Now, the insurance company came back and said, you need to take that up with Xactimate. And my counter argument is, let's look at workman's comp codes. Yes. Demolition code is very different from the roofer code, and the price that they're charging my crew is quite a bit more exaggerated for somebody up on a roof doing a demo.
Do you understand his argument?
Yes.
It's an excellent argument. What he's saying is the cost, just 1 second, Ed, I won't forget you. What he's saying is the cost for workers' comp for roofing crews is much higher because they're up on this elevated surface that's with a pitched roof, and they could tumble off and get hurt much easier than somebody working on the ground. So the workers' comp rate for that is much higher. And so what he's saying is our actual cost to be able to do this tear off is far greater with the roofing crew. And I don't know of any roofing company that hires the demolition guys to tear off the roof, and then they have installers come in and install the roof afterwards. There may be 1 or 2 out there that do that, but I don't know of any. And so it's an illegitimate thing to have that in there. So what you do is, remember what we talked about? You question skillfully, you ask the proper questions, you listen carefully to their answers, and you provide facts and evidence. And in this case, objective third-party evidence showing the difference between workers' comp rates for roofing crews versus demolition crews, as an example. Yes, Ed?
I also wanted to point out, even though roofing is the most substantial difference in work comp rates, like for instance, if you use the carpenter, that might be about 12% or 12 points as work comp. And roofing would be about 42 points in my state, compared to other states. But it also goes for other trades too. HVAC, don't look at every one of the trades and look at it. Xactimate is PMO for nearly, if not all, of the trades. And they've gotten away with it for years without anybody observing it. So that's one thing. Another thing is, have them explain to you, if they're doing a tear-off, if you have this bunch of laborers that come to do a tear-off, I like the work comp argument too. Get a letter from your insurance carrier to back that up and support it. I would like to use laborers for doing a tear-off on a roof. At what rate would you classify these laborers and well, you're getting an answer from the insurance company. Go right to the insurance company, you know, go with the insurance broker from the company that you're doing that particular estimate with at that point in time. You could have pure evidence from their own company. So the other thing was, when that demo who's now doing the tear off, who does the dry in?
So what he's saying is make sure that on these tear-offs and your removal part, on all these things, go in and make sure that they don't have DMO as the crew actually tearing that out. Let's say that they're going to tear out an HVAC system and put in a new one. They're not going to have some unskilled laborers come in there and do the demo. They're going to have the licensed AC guy come in there and do that. And so make sure that you check that so that it's corrected. Nico?
Actually, something that's going to help with that argument, and anyone who uses Xactimate to do their estimating, recently there was a court case where the courts found that it is not legitimate for the insurance companies to use demolition because that is classified as someone who is completely demolishing the structure. And so they actually found that it should be, and they're actually talking about doing some things with Xactware on the fact that that's their default. It should actually be based off of the skilled trade that's being performed. So what I'm going to be doing probably this afternoon is pulling that information so that we can get it into the site.
And also get it on my Facebook forum, if you don't mind too, so that can be disseminated to all the rest of our guys as well. Yes?
One of our contractors, and we do a lot of work as referrals, okay, but we advise that contractor, he ought to go back and do work comp audit.
What's that?
Work comp audit.
Yes.
To make it interesting, he has now went back to all the major carriers that he has dealt with for the last 3 years. Because in our state, we can go back and redo work comp audits, and he's requested breakdown summaries from each of the insurance companies for work comp. And our state requires through workforce development with the state high risk pool for roofing. The insurance companies have to provide it, so they're going back through 3 years worth of Xactimate records for this one carrier, or for this one contract.
Ooh, do me a favor and post that on my Facebook forum as well.
It's going to be interesting.
That is interesting.
Okay, because we advised them to do that years ago with job
Ooh,
classification.
that's excellent.
Because it's also work comp audit. You might as well take the lower work comp and break it apart for the demo if you're not getting paid for the RFG, for the roofing, for the roof, instead of paying the higher work comp.
What are the 2 states that don't require workers' comp in the U.S.? Texas and New Jersey. Texas and New Jersey. Nope, don't require it. All the other 48 states and Washington, D.C. does. All right, so there's the removal of the felt. Make sure you have that on there. Hardly anyone puts that on there. So is that something that I could cut out if I can come to an agreement with somebody? Sure, I'll cut that out to come to an agreement with somebody. You bet. Is it legitimate and reasonable? Yes. Absolutely. They're going to argue, they're going to say, well, the felt comes off with the shingles. My argument back to them is, have you ever done that? Have you actually been on a crew and tear off the shingles and see the felt come off with it? Wait for an answer. No, you haven't. Have you ever watched it done? Because I'm here to tell you that I have, and it does not. Especially not in Texas where I am, because it gets hot in Texas, and the felt sticks to the decking. And it doesn't come off with the shingles at all. It comes off much harder than the shingles. Shingles come off easy. Xactimate does not provide a line item for the removal of roofing felt. Therefore, we have created this line item to account for this function. We not only have to account for the labor required to tear off the old felt, but also a dumpster large enough to accommodate this additional waste material and the fee necessary to legally dispose of the old material in a legal landfill. If you are told that roofing felt is easily removed when shingles are torn off, this is misinformation. We will be happy to provide you with a video, blah, 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 blah. Do you see what I'm doing right here in the notes section under this line item? I'm explaining why I have this line item in here. Because their thing is, why do you have this in here? I know that's going to be their question. Why does he have this in here? No one has this line item in their estimate. So why do you have it? So I know that that's his objection, like a salesman knows how to deal with objections, right? So I know the objection is coming. So I deal with the objection ahead of time in my notes before it ever comes. And then if he says that, I said, did you read my note? Because I answered the question that you just posed me in the notes.
He misses it.
Right?
If everybody started doing that, it would become industry standard.
Wouldn't it?
Yes, sir.
That's why we're talking about this today. How to write a SMART estimate.
If there were 2 layers of roof that were removed,
Now see, there is a line item for removal of second layer of shingles, but there's not a line item for a second or third layer of felt, just like there's not a line item to remove a single layer of felt. So if there's 2 or 3 layers, my son has one going on right now in Frisco near Dallas, 3 layers of felt under the shingles. So you have to tear it off to the deck. Why? Anyone? Why do you have to tear it off to the deck? So you can visualize the deck and make sure it's a stable, nailable surface to install the new roof on. That's why.
but would you specifically charge for removal of 2 layers of felt?
Oh, absolutely. Of course. Because it's additional labor, plus you have a bigger dumpster, and you have to pay for that additional weight when you dump it at the dump. So absolutely, you bet. Xactimate does not provide a line item for removal of roofing felt, therefore we've created this line item to account for this function. We not only have to account, oh, we already read that. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, line item number 7, remove additional layer of comp shingles. There's your additional layer. Removal and disposal, laminated, 19.78 squares. Now what is that? What do I have right under that number 7 bolded? Purpose, function of this line item. Write that down. Very important. The purpose and function of this line item. So I'm answering the question, why do you have this in your estimate? Well, here's the purpose and function of this particular line item. Okay, accounts for the removal, holding in a dumpster, and legal disposal of any additional layers of roof coverings underneath the visible roof covering to a legal landfill. Roofer per hour, number 8. Purpose, function of this line item. To account for the extra labor necessary to remove staples from a roof with stapled shingles versus nailed shingles. The need for this line item is rare, but the labor to perform this additional work is not accounted for in the line item to tear off the roof covering when it is required. Failure to perform this additional work may cause leaks in the future due to raised fasteners under the new roof covering. You like that? See, purpose and function. Every single line item you have in your estimate has a purpose and function. It explains why you've included this line item in here. Purpose and function, purpose and function, purpose and function in the notes on every single line item. Is this making sense? Now what are we doing? What we talk about, documenting your file. This is your documentation, right? This is why I have these line items. I'm justifying it ahead of time. Will they read it? I don't know. But you know what? That's not my problem. My problem isn't what they will and won't do. My problem is to be a professional, and I'm going to provide the documentation to justify my position on every single thing that I'm recommending. So I'm going to do my job. He may not do his job, but that's his problem. I'm going to do my job. Make sense? Try another one. Removal, tear off, haul off, and dispose of wood shake shingles. Purpose, function of this line item. To properly install a new roof covering per manufacturer specs, we must provide a stable and nailable surface. If the substrate is not stable, how are the installation crews going to have access to make the repair replacement? Likewise with nailable, how can an installation crew perform the repair replacement if the fasteners will not properly hold the shingles per manufacturer specs? So that's the reason why you have to tear off the wood shake that's underneath the comp shingles, and you have to then you have to deck it. You have to tear that off and you have to put decking in. And so I have purpose and function. Yes?
So, in my area, we have a lot of old shake roofs that they're just not allowing shake roofs anymore because of, fires and whatnot.
You bet.
Where I really run into this, though, is 3-tab. I have a 3-tab roof, I tear it off, I'm going back on with architectural shingle. The insurance company right now is only paying for a 3-tab to go back on.
And that's correct, because of like, kind, and quality.
Correct.
They don't owe for an upgrade.
Well, we're running into a situation where the supply houses don't carry the 3-tab in our area anymore. So,
No 3 tabs at all?
They're only carrying enough quantity for accessories. So most of the supply houses carry 3 colors.
That's
up to 10
bizarre.
Squares.
That's bizarre.
But I have had success with getting a letter from the supply house that they don't carry this in stock anymore. Architectural is the new standard.
So if that's the situation you find yourself in, then what are you going to do? You're going to obtain facts and evidence, objective third-party source material. In this case, it's a letter from the supplier saying that we don't have that. And so as an adjuster, my question would be what next? Is this the only supplier that's within a reasonable, driving time from the house that you're going to be doing the work on, the loss?
Get an estimate for freight.
And what the insurance companies try to do is call Home Depot, which pools from all the supply houses in the area, to say that we might be able to get enough. Yeah, I called all supply houses. It wasn't possible.
And so what he does is he documents that, right? You're documenting your file. Documentation is king. So you document that I've called all these Home Depots. These are I called Home Depot number 671, all the different ones. This is the date and these are the times. These are the people I spoke with and this is what they said.
Well,
That's true.
if you do something like that where you have to pull from multiple Home Depots, wouldn't that be extra labor for?
Well, sure, you're going to charge for that, of course. Unless you want to work for free. Stephen, if you want to work for free, but, right?
Yep.
And so, yes.
Mine's just an FYI. Nationwide, and I've got State Farm to do this here lately too, if you're in a hail-prone area, they will go ahead and pay for the upgrade.
There are some carriers that are actually doing that, especially if they're going to upgrade to the Class 4, because that gets the discount, and then the insured has waived their right to make a claim for cosmetic damage to shingles. And then you're arguing about what's cosmetic and what's functional. Yes?
Just a little FYI for everybody regarding what he was saying. Now, I had a situation with flooring. It was actually vinyl flooring, but it was like plank vinyl flooring. And me and the adjuster were going back and forth for it. You couldn't acquire it anymore. And they was like, yes, you can. I actually got a hold of the manufacturer and asked them to provide me with a list of every place that flooring shipped at in the past year. And they sent me over a nice Excel spreadsheet and said, this is every place that we sent it to in your geographical area. I didn't call every one of them, but I went through there randomly and they're like, no, we don't have it. And I provided it to him. I said, now you can call every one of them, and when you find the correct quantity, let me know and I'll call them.
Boom.
But he said, never mind. I'll take care of it."
See, there you go. So what did he do? Objective third-party source material. How good a source is the manufacturer themselves? That's a pretty darn good source. Right? See what you're doing? You're documenting the file? Right? Purpose and function, purpose and function, purpose and function. Laminate shingles without felt includes a 7% cutting loss based on how cut up the roof was, right? Purpose includes laminate composition shingles, roofing nails, and installation labor. I copied that directly out of Xactimate when it says what's included at that price. All right? Excludes roofing felt underlayment. Note that Xactimate's line item description does not include or account for starter course or hip and ridge shingles. It is clear that Xactimate's line item description paying for this line item that is designed for field shingles only. This line item does include a sufficient waste factor to account for the cutting loss that would be expected for a roof of this complexity based on how cut up it is. Per Xactimate, the scope of this line item excludes anything not included within their line item description. And I include the website where they can click on it and verify that what I'm saying is accurate out of Xactimate's own mouth. So much for starter and hip and ridge being included in tear-off in your, right?
You read a lot there. Did you say that it's not included?
It's not included.
In the felt? A lot of shingle manufacturers will only warranty their product if there is a layer of felt under it.
Correct. So you have to do it
Right.
because if the shingle manufacturer says that it has to be done, then it's code. It's illegal for you to not do it. In other words, if you knowingly know that this is the building code, and as a contractor or the homeowner do it anyway, you've just committed a, what's the word? A crime. That makes you a criminal. So if I understand you correctly, so you're insisting that my client commit a crime so that you can save a few bucks. Am I mischaracterizing what you're saying? That is what they're saying. Is it not? Purpose and function. So you're going to have purpose and function on every one of these line items, and then you have to be able to you know, be able to make a compelling argument of why and justifying why you have this line item in your estimate. Because you're going to have a whole bunch of things that they're not used to seeing. And what they're going to do is they're going to say, you are crazy. I've never seen anything like this before. And then you go back to, Jim, like we said at the very beginning, if I have anything illegitimate or unreasonable on my estimate, then I want to strike it. I want to. But I need for you to explain to me how you arrived at your conclusion that these line items are either illegitimate or unreasonable. And if you can do that, then I'm happy to strike it. So I'm all ears. Help me understand.
Can you give us general guidelines on the issue of waste, wastage? A lot of the roofers will use, make up a percentage. They'll say, we always use, 15% waste.
On a hip roof. Sure.
Can you give us some general advice about waste calculation?
What does it mean?
Yeah.
What does waste mean? It's the things you throw in the trash, not the things that you're installing on the roof, right? Yep. So waste is the cutoff items that are left over from the installation of the roof. It occurs at rake ends. It occurs at a ridge when trim off the top of the shingles when you get up to a ridge. It occurs at the hips, and it occurs in the valleys. You're going to have cut off material, and you throw that in the dumpster, and that's waste. What does that have to do with starter and hip and ridge? You know what it has to do with starter and hip and ridge? Nothing, because that's being installed on the roof. It's not being thrown in the waste can and taken to the dump. They've just made something up. They made it up out of whole cloth, and contractors have taken it on the chin for years, and so it's their fault. It's the contractor's fault for allowing this to go on and accepting it and going, oh yeah, 10% for gable and 15% for hip and ridge, when it's nonsense. So why don't you rather use the actual amount of the tear-off, right, that you're tearing off, so many squares of field shingles being torn off, so many squares of starter being torn off, so many squares of, or bundles of hip and ridge being torn off, and then so many of each one of those three being installed. So you'll have installation of the field shingles, you have installation of the starter, and you have the installation of the hip and ridge. Why don't we be accurate to the linear foot, then round it up to the bundle? On drip edge, you can only buy drip edge in 10-foot sticks. So it should be, what? 320, 330, 340, rounded up to the 10. Just like you do on shingles, 0.33, 0.66, 0.00. Round it up, because you can't buy a 6-foot stick of drip edge, you have to buy a 10-foot. So you round it up to the 10-foot. Same thing with felt. Same thing with rolled roofing. Rolled roofing, how many squares in a roll of rolled roofing? No one knows? Two squares. So let's say that you have a half a square of flat area here, then how much are you going to put in? Tear off half a square, install 2, because you have to buy 2 rolls, one roll, which is 2 squares. What are you going to do with all this extra?
Toss it.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to toss it. Asphalt starter, purpose and function. Starter course shingles are a key component to your new roofing system. The starter strips are unseen, installed below the first course of shingles at the eave and up along the rake edges of your roof. The primary function of the starter strip is to provide blow-off in moderate wind of the first course of shingles at the eave by adhering this course with strong mastic adhesive to the starter itself. This is critical because if the vulnerable starter course of shingles are lifted during wind-driven rain, leaks can cascade into the much larger damage due to water intrusion into your home. Is that a pretty good description of why you need starter strip on the roof? So if this is illegitimate or unreasonable, help me understand your position. So now you understand my position, help me understand yours. If you want us, you and I, to omit this line item. Good luck refuting that. Y'all like this stuff?
Yes.
Excellent.
And you can go on and on, drip edge. I mean, I got a whole paragraph there. And I'll talk about the Asphalt Roofing Manufacturers Association. I talk about the IRC code, section 905.2.8.5 states a drip edge shall be blah, blah, blah. I mean, I document the file. This is how you should be writing estimates. It's called a SMART estimate. So, what are things that you're leaving off your estimates that are legitimate and reasonable? Tons of stuff. So what are the things that a contractor is going to have to actually do to perform this thing? Let me give you an example. A metal shed. So let's say that you have a metal shed in the backyard that's damaged by hail, and you can't replace the roof on a metal shed, so you have to replace the whole metal shed. So what do you have to do? So what would the average adjuster have in there to remove the shed? R&R shed. What would the average PA or contractor have? R&R shed. That's what you'd have. Let me see what I have. Let's take a look at this. Delivery charge for the shed. Are they charging a delivery charge? If they are, you put it in. If they aren't, then you delete that out of your macro, right? You delete the line items that aren't applicable to this particular loss. So I had this in my macro, and if I'm not doing a shed, then I delete the whole shed thing, the whole shed room. All right? Wood fence. Detach and reset the wood fence to access the backyard to remove and replace shed. How are they going to get the old one out and the new one in without detaching and resetting some fence? And if it's a 8-foot fence, then how wide are the sections? 6 foot wide. 6-foot fences are 8-foot sections, and 8-foot fences are 6-foot sections, right? And so you can't get the shed in through a 6-foot hole, so you're going to have to pull one post and detach and reset 2 sections of fence, plus replace the post. Are you putting these things in your estimate? If you're not,
Now we are.
you're leaving money on the table. Are these legitimate line items that are actually going to have to be performed by the contractor?
Sure.
Yeah, you bet. R&R storage shed, and then we're going to clean and reseal those sections of fence if need be. If not, then you delete those line items out of your macro, right? And then you haul off debris to the dump. Have y'all been putting that to haul off the old shed? So how many line items here? 8 line items to remove and replace a shed. Are all of them legitimate and reasonable? Can you justify them? Sure. That's just one simple example. Simple, yes. Easy? No, it's hard work. Chip mentioned this. It's hard work documenting the file correctly. It is. That's what separates the professionals from everyone else. Is it not? Yes. It is. So what kind of PA do you want to be? I mean, you decide. So the top 20% of all PAs make 80% of the money. It's what's known as the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. The top 20% make 80% of the money. Of that 20%, the top 20%, the top 20% of them, which is the top 4% of the whole, make as much money as the other 96% together. So which type of PA do you want to be? Which type? So what you do is you educate yourself and you hone your skills. You get on with Mark's training and you hone your skills and you go to every single thing you can go to. I think that I probably can explain general contractors' overhead and profit as well as anybody I've ever met. But guess what? There was a class in Texas to learn about general contractors' overhead and profit. $1,700 that class cost. Guess who showed up at that class? I did. Because if I get one nugget, it's worth it. So I go to every single thing I can go to. I read every book I can get my hands on. Why do I do that? Because this is my profession. That's why I do that. Because I want to be a professional. That's why. And so, did I learn something at that OMP thing? Actually, I did not. But, I met a number of really, I got a good write-off. I made a number of relationships there. The next time that they put on that class, the guy who was teaching part of it, he called me up and he goes, I've got a funeral I have to go to. Can you take my place teaching at that class? And so I found myself the next time teaching at the class. So you never know what might occur when you go to one of these classes, right? You might be called to speak at one of them, right, Greg?
Yes.
Is it worth the work? It is work. That's why they call it that. That's why you get paid good money if you get the nice, big, juicy losses. And guess who gets the big, juicy losses? The professionals who know how to market. Would you agree that Chip knows how to market? Yes. Marketing genius, right? He's not in here, so. Oh. So what you do is you hire the best salesman that you can afford, and if you're not that guy. Let's say that you're really good at claims, but you're not so good at sales. Then you hire somebody who is. Because that's who's going to be bringing in the nice big $1 million, $10 million claims. Is a salesman, someone who can sell. I know PAs in Dallas that aren't that great at PAs, and they do the multi-million-dollar losses. Why do they get those losses? Because they have very good salesmen bringing them into them. And you know what? They settle much sooner than they should. They leave a lot of money on the table. They're not that great at PAs. But they're bringing in the big deals because they have really good salesmen that go out there and market their services. Why do I have this in here? So if you go into, if you're going to be using Xactimate, and you pull up any given line item, and there's a little thing, click to view, you double click on that little picture, and it pulls this up. Has anybody ever done that before? It explains everything that has to do with that line item. What the pricing specialists at Xactimate considered. For example, on this roofing line item, they only considered 3 things. What are they? The shingles, the material, the fasteners, and labor. That's it. Does that include general contractors' overhead and profit? No, it includes what? Shingles, fasteners, labor. What it says. That's the only thing it includes. Because it says so. Excludes felt. Yes.
Now, what about, we already automatically supposedly include subcontractors overhead and profit?
And they do.
But since it's not listed there, if it's not included, is it therefore excluded?
Do you know what overhead and profit is? How many people actually understand it well enough to explain to someone else what overhead is? I mean, really understand it, the difference, how to differentiate between general overhead versus specific overhead. Let me see your hands. Not so many of you, huh? Well, let me explain it to you, all right? So general overhead is the overhead of a contracting business, whether they get the Smith job or whether they do not. So they have an office, they have a secretary, they have trucks that they're paying every month on the lease or whatever, they have insurance, all these ongoing costs that are going on all the time, whether they get the Smith job or not, that's your general overhead. Specific overhead is the job-specific overhead. For example, because we got the Smith job, now what do we have to do that we ordinarily wouldn't have to do if we didn't have the Smith job? Well, we have to have a supervisor overseeing the project, right? That's that residential or commercial supervision, all these things. Those are specific overhead. So, the overhead in general contractors' overhead and profit is the general overhead. That's the ongoing everyday expenses that are going on whether you get the Smith job or not. So, job-specific or overhead isn't included in GCOMP then, is it? So you ought to have that as separate line items in your estimate because they aren't included in general overhead. In fact, the Adjuster's Bible So who here knows what the CPCU designation is for adjusters? A couple of you, okay. It's like a PhD for adjusters, all right? If you got the CPCU, you don't even have to do continuing education for the rest of your life because you have a PhD in adjusting. And so there's a manual, write this down. It's called Property Loss Adjusting. This is the book that you study to pass your CPCU designation. And it's written and published by the AICPCU. AICPCU. And the book costs like $40-50. It's about 1.5 inches thick. It's a lot of reading. On page 8.19 and point 8, published by the AICPCU. On page 8.19 and 8.20 of that book, probably the strongest argument for general contractors' overhead and profit being included in every single loss that a general contractor is hired is on those pages of the Adjuster's Bible themselves. Print it out, there's your objective third-party source material. If you want to know what it says, go and buy the book. I've already told you what the book is and what page to look on. Right? So what happens, ooh, wow, that got loud. So what happens if there's a material cost increase in Houston or in Miami, or a labor increase in one of these cities? You know, you've heard of supply and demand? So the demand for the work has gone like what in Houston and Miami? Like a rocket, all right? And what has the supply done? It has increased because there's some guys coming from Minnesota and Washington State and California to go work in Houston and Florida. It's inevitable, right? But will it keep up with the demand for work? No. Remember New Orleans? Are you crazy? Not even close. So what happens to prices with supply and demand? Prices increase. So what is Xactimate supposed to do? Keep up with those price increases. What if they're not doing so? In Texas, in March of a year and a half ago, we had softball-sized hail in Wiley, Texas. I mean, I'm telling you, it was size of grapefruits. Divots. I mean, you have to be careful walking in the yard, you'll twist your ankle. I'm not kidding. Right? And so the cost of roofing, the labor was $45, it went to $75 overnight. $30. How much an increase is that? 67%. They still aren't reflecting the full $30 increase in labor on the roofing a year and a half later. They still aren't. So what do? Change the price in Xactimate? No, because then you're manipulating the price database, right? So we don't want to manipulate the price database. However, we do want to account for the additional cost in labor and material. So how do we do it? Right here. It's a write-in. That's a separate line item. That's a write-in that says roofing market adjustment materials per square. Roofing market adjustment for labor per square. So you use the line item that's in Xactimate so that you're not accused of manipulating the price database like some of them do. And then you adjust for it in a separate line item, and then you put your purpose and function description underneath it, explaining how you arrived at that conclusion, and you provide documentation from a roofing crew, and you don't say we're going from 45 to 30. You just say that there's a 67% increase. That's what they need to write in their letter. On their official letterhead, so you're providing objective third-party documentation of the increase in labor, and you could do the same thing, go to the supply house, and you get a letter from them that says there's, you know, a 20% increase in materials. Ed?
You have a wonderful way of explaining another aspect that deals directly with this. Nowadays, again, the insurance carriers are putting in MRP, manufactured repair program prices, or PSP, for service providers, in particular, managed sky roofing. So I've heard you speak about that, but I'm sure that everybody's ears will be wide open for how you describe to debate them against that issue.
So what he's talking about is insurance companies have preferred contractors. They're preferred by them because they'll work cheap. Why do they work cheap? Because they're given a tremendous volume of work by the carrier, and because they make up for it with volume. supposedly. Okay? So who are these MRPs, like Mad Sky? Who do they work for? The insured? No, they work for the insurance company. Are they going to send in supplemental requests when they find hidden damage? Are they going to bite the hand that feeds them? No, they're not. So is that a realistic market rate? No, it's a manipulation of the price database. That's what it is. And so you don't let that occur. You just say, no, you're manipulating the price database, and I'm not going to agree to a manipulation of the price database. Xactimate, and then you use Xactimate's own words. In the shingles and everything, it says that we apply the median price. In other words, the middle of the road. If there's guys doing it for 80 and there's guys doing it for 40, then we're going to put the price at 60, right smack dab in the middle. If they're already doing it for median prices, what is this price manipulation doing? It puts it way below into the lower aspects of the labor that's been going on in any geographical area, and so you don't accept that.
Are you familiar with Hanley Wood cost versus value?
Say again?
Hanley Wood cost versus value?
No.
That does an analysis of regional pricing.
Is that like the Craftsman books and?
Molly Magazine puts it out.
Molly Magazine puts it out.
Okay, no.
Where they tell you what the average price to do a project is. Is that substantial?
But that doesn't break down roofing per square or anything like that.
No, it just breaks, it tells you what the whole job is.
What he's saying is you need to do your research, like I haven't done, I've never heard of Hanley. And you need to know of all these sources so that you can be able to go in and say, hey, Craftsman says the price is this, Hanley's saying the price is this, and you're documenting that what you're coming up with is a legitimate price per square or per square foot of flooring or carpet or whatever the case may be.
Now, in Xactimate, if we're talking Xactimate, you can change the unit pricing, and I know you're saying that's manipulating, but it will highlight that unit price. You go in, put your note in, and you explain, once again, through your notebook procedure. But what I've always been explained from Xactimate is that if you don't, at the end of your estimate, connect with exact analysis, it will upload that pricing differences into their database, so that way they can start seeing the contractors out in the field, what their actual expense to do a project is.
I'm highly skeptical of anything that Xactimate says.
I agree. But if you don't hit exact analysis, the only people that are hitting exact analysis is the insurance industry. Thus, it's going to be artificial price runs unit pricing.
I would do it the way I recommend. I wouldn't, because every time that you go in and change the price database, it puts an asterisk next to it, that line item, and it brings the attention to the adjuster that this price has been manipulated.
But I do that for a reason, because then I go in with my note on that line item to explain, I want that highlighted, I want that brought out.
And that's why I use a separate line item to bring it out. But that's a matter of opinion.
Yeah.
See, on that point, I can tell on the SimSol side, we use both, Xactimate and Hansen. On the SimSol side, if you manually adjust a price on something for a line item, and you do your Steve work here, that has no impact whatsoever on the price database. It has it for that particular line item. Manipulating the database, pricing database, is what the insurance companies are doing. So what we're doing is not hitting that pricing database. It's a very, very important distinction to understand.
I recommend a separate line item.
Yeah.
I hold to my recommendation, which is what it says right there. That's what I recommend that you do. So how do you print out a scope report? So you had a question earlier that if I do a scope report, how am I going to know what the price is? Well, you know what the price is because you do your full estimate. You're just not printing out an estimate with the pricing on it. You're printing out a scope with no prices. You still already know what the estimate is. You know the amount because you wrote your estimate. It's all in the estimate. You know the price. You're just not printing out the prices. That's all. So what you do is you go into estimate reports, and you click this little drop down right there, and you select scope, and you print. And it prints it exactly the way everything else is, except no price. It just has the quantity, number of shingles, linear feet of drip edge, linear feet of gutter, whatever, but no price. And you print out a scope report. And that's what you bring, and you bring two. You bring one for the adjuster and one for you. And that's what you use as a worksheet as you go around with the adjuster, and you can make any changes on that you deem necessary that the two of you agree to, right? Until you come to an agreed scope. Once you come to an agreed scope, the price takes care of itself. Except for overhead and profit. Would you like me to tell you in 3 minutes how you can explain to a 5th grader what's going on with general contractors' overhead and profit? What's really going on? In 3 minutes, explain to a 5th grader. Okay, here you go. So, I'm at home and I have a hankering. See, I'm in the South, so I have hankerings. I have a hankering for some cherry pie. And I don't want a store-bought cherry pie, so I'm going to go to a baker and I'm going to have a real one made with real cherries. So I go in and I ask them, say, how much it costs for a cherry pie to be baked? Fresh. $25. So fine, I give them the $25 and they said, come back in 3 hours. So I'll come back in 3 hours and open the door, and man, that cherry pie hits me in the face, that smell, and I went, wow. Man, this is going to be great. I love the smell of cherry pie. I can't wait to tear into me a piece. And it's sitting there on the counter. I open the box, and there's a slice missing. And I go, what's this? And they said, that's your cherry pie. I said, no. I ordered a cherry pie, not 5/6 of a cherry pie. There's a slice missing. So I'm getting 83% of a cherry pie, and I paid for 100% of a cherry pie. And they said, no, you don't understand. There's not enough ingredients in the cherry pie for you to qualify for a whole cherry pie. Sound familiar? Not enough trades? There's not enough ingredients for you to qualify for a whole cherry pie. I said, what are you talking about? I ordered and paid for a whole cherry pie, and I want my pie. No, you don't understand. The recipe isn't complex enough for you to qualify for a whole cherry pie. Isn't this absurd? Imagine if they were to say you don't qualify for a whole cherry pie that you paid for in full because there's not enough ingredients or the recipe's not complex enough. It's absurd on its face. And that's what they're saying with trades, complexity, all that nonsense. It's smoke and mirrors, guys. It's smoke and mirrors. And that's what's going on with overhead and profit. The insured is paying 6/6 for something. They're paying in full, and they're getting 5/6 in return 95-97% of the time. The only time they get the overhead and profit is when you guys negotiate it, or it's a significant loss, and they'll put overhead and profit in. Sometimes they won't even do it. I got an appraisal right now that's a fire. It's a $100,000 fire they left off overhead and profit. On a $100,000 residential fire, they left off overhead and profit. Wow. So they're charging 6/6 for something, and they're giving back 5/6 in return, and they're keeping the money that they collected for the overhead and profit because it's part of the limits of liability for which they've been paying premium, just like the cherry pie. That's what's going on. That's what's going on. It's the biggest scam in insurance.
It's a numbers game.
And you know what? Hardly anybody's figured it out, what's actually going on. And it can be explained to a 5th grader with the cherry pie story. Comparative analysis. Okay, so what is our dispute? What remains in dispute between us and the adjuster? So you get the adjuster's estimate, and you get yours out, and you set them back down side by side. So how do you document what remains in dispute between you and the adjuster? How do you do it? Well, let me show you how I do it. It's what we refer to as a comparative analysis. So I go line by line. In this case, line item 1, protect landscaping, cover with drop cloth. You notice that I have a red 0 right there. So I have 1 quantity of 1, because it's just a placeholder. I mean, maybe I have 100 feet, 200 feet or whatever of drop cloth, right? They have 0. So I put down, so if there's a difference in either quantity or price, then I put down their number next to mine, and I write it in a red pen. Why do you think I write it in red? When you were in school, when you got something wrong, what did the teacher do? They wrote a red X. You got it wrong. So red is wrong. So I write their numbers next to my numbers, and I write their numbers in red. So if there's a difference in quantity, I say it's 32 squares, and he says it's 30, then I write down 30, their 30 next to my 32. There's a difference in scope. If I'm at $167 a square and that 165, then I write their 165 next to my 167. There's a difference in price. And I do that for every single line item where there's a dispute. If it's just a small difference, then I don't even mess with it. Does that make sense? And I do it for every line item. Remove laminated comp shingles, 73.39 squares. I have a check. That means the quantity's the same, or you can put a red dot. I also put a red dot, as I'm doing the cross analysis, I put a red dot next to their quantity and their price once I've gone over here and done it on mine. So I know where I am, and I know that I've accounted for every single quantity and price for every line item on their estimate, because I've got a red dot next to every single one of those as I've done my cross analysis. By the time you get done, and of course where they have overhead and profit missing, next to mine I'm going to have 0, and my overhead is 0, and my profit, because they have 0 in there. They omitted that. Now I have a very succinct, accurate accounting of every single line item that remains in dispute between me and them. Now I can send that to them as my comparative analysis, and here's where we remain in dispute. So let's talk about these line items. Does that make sense? That's called a comparative analysis. So I come up with that a number of years ago when I was an adjuster to figure out how to differentiate between what I have and what a contractor or a PA would have. So I could very quickly tell what's in dispute, what remains in dispute, and what doesn't. We do this for guys, so if you want to hire us to do this for you, we can do it for you. We write SMART estimates. If you want to outsource your SMART estimate to us, you send us the carrier estimate, and you write a paragraph or two about what's wrong with it, and we have a macro with all the purpose and function and all that stuff already in it. I mean, I've been working on these macros for 18 years as an appraiser. They're pretty thorough. My purpose and function descriptions are pretty well done. So if you'd prefer, here's my shameless pitch. If you prefer to outsource that, then we'll be glad to have your work. All right? So this is called a comparative analysis, and you do every single line item that way. See, line by line. Remove asphalt starter, 0, because they included it in the waste, right? Remove asphalt starter, install asphalt starter. Drip edge, I'm at 552, they're at 529. What should I be at? Should I be at 552? 560, rounded up to the 10, right? Multiples of 10? So you get the point? Line by line. If you want us to outsource your estimates to us, call my son Adam. He's not my 18-year-old son, he's my 36-year-old son. He has 10 years of adjusting experience. He can run circles around me with Xactimate, and he has our estimates made easy. There's his phone number. Feel free to call him, and you can outsource some of your estimate writing to him. 469-235-3133. Guess what? I agree. How to Win Friends and Influence People. I have it in my slideshow also. So maybe you ought to get that book, since both Chip and I recommend it. So I read this book 30 years ago. I was 25 years old when I read this book. And it greatly impacted my life, but I never read it again. So I picked it up about 4 or 5 months ago, because I haven't read it in like 30 years. And I read through it, and after I was done, I'm like, oh my goodness. Why have I not read this book every year in the intervening 30 years that has passed? This is so good. I read it 3 times, back to back, highlighting, taking notes. It is so good to teach you how to deal with difficult people. And what is it? What is your profession? Dealing with difficult people. So the book costs like what, $10? It's been on the bestseller list since 1932. I highly recommend that you go spend $10 and get this book and read it.
Have an audio version too,
There you go.
so you can listen to it in your car.
In fact, they have one now. I was just told, someone told me that they have How to Win Friends, Influence People in the Digital Age. I would recommend that you get the original one. And if you want to get the digital age one, fine. But read the original one and then read the digital age, because they may have messed it up. I don't know. Oh, someone was asking about waste. So here's my question, my talking point. So ask the adjuster, well, starter and hip and ridge is included in waste. So you ask, remember, ask questions. How do you define waste? And they just stare at you. They don't know what to say. Here's my definition. Building materials collected on site to be disposed of in a legal landfill due to the cutting loss of excess materials removed on valleys, hips, ridges, and rake edges. I would recommend that you memorize that definition. I made it up. You could probably make up one better. Okay? Can we agree that this is a reasonable definition for roofing waste? Yes? No? If you have a better one, I'm all ears. Yes? Okay. If my definition is inaccurate, please correct me. Can you show me where waste is located in the, it shouldn't say waste is located in this definition. It should say, can you show me where starter or hip and ridge is in this definition? Oh. If you want to come up here and take a photo of this with your camera, come on up. I don't think I can make it bigger. Again, please define waste. Do you see what I'm doing? I'm holding his feet to the fire and making him... I was talking to, this morning, I was not in here, a gentleman at breakfast. The problem is the adjusters, they have these canned talking points they keep saying over and over again. You keep hearing the adjusters, different adjusters say the same thing, and you know that they've been taught to say this thing, right? They've never thought it through to its conclusion. They have never thought this through. Like the starter and hip and ridge, they've never actually thought it through. And if you're able to ask questions and they go, well, wait a second, he's got a really good point. Like I did with Ray on the removal of felt. I said, you know what, Ray, you got a good point. And so, guess what I did? I agreed with Ray, and we changed it, and we added in the tear off of felt in that particular appraisal. And so if you'll do that, all of a sudden, it occurs to the adjuster, you know what? My feet are firmly planted in midair. I don't have a legitimate basis and foundation for this position that I've been espousing this whole time. It's a bunch of nonsense. They're not going to maybe volunteer that information to you, but all of a sudden it clicks in their head and they go, wait a second. Yes, Nico.
So I'm sure, I know I've heard it more times than I can ever think, but I'm sure some of these guys have heard it as well, so I want to hear what you would say back to it. When they say, oh, it's not technically in the waste, we're providing the additional monies from the waste so that you can purchase those materials.
That's an excellent point, Nico. I have an excellent point too. Inside my estimate that I'd given you, if you had read in my description, I explained the labor necessary to install a bundle of starter strip versus the labor necessary to install a bundle of field shingles. I did the same thing for hip and ridge. And the amount of labor to install starter or hip and ridge is 3 to 4 times that of installing field shingles. So if we use the install field shingles, then that would be an inaccurate measure of that labor, would it not? See how I turned the statement into a question? You can do that with all statements, can't you? We talked about the NAIC and reasonably uniform appearance yesterday, right? our Facebook forum. Join our Facebook forum, pose your own questions, or if someone else has a question and you know the answer, you can post the answer. We have guys like Nico. He goes on there and he reads one of the questions, and maybe Tony and I answer a question, or maybe we don't, and maybe Nico answers the question. And Greg chimes in with his point of view and the things that he knows about it. And so what are we doing? We're all helping each other out instead of seeing each other as our competition. Remember, I started out yesterday talking about that. How do you see the guy to the left and right of you? Do you see them as your competition, or do you see them as your brother? What's the oldest form of warfare?
Cain and Abel.
Divide and conquer. And they're doing a pretty darn good job of dividing and conquering. So how about we come together as a cohesive band of brothers and help each other out? How about we do that? Wow, what a novel idea. That's what we're doing here. This just happens to be the forum that we do it on. You don't have to do it on ours. There's lots of other ways to do it. This just happens to be the one that Tony and I created so that he and I can help you guys out. Now, if I'm helping you guys out, if you need an appraisal, who are you going to come to? Ghostbusters? No. To us. Who are you going to call? Right? So you can write that down and join our Facebook page. So there's Tony. Tony started doing this 45 years ago. He has forgotten more than I know. And that's not a cute little saying that I say. I mean, we'll be talking about something and he'll bring something up and I'll go, whoa, wait a second, what'd you just say? And he'll go, blah, blah, blah. And I go, I don't know that. I've never heard that before in my life. He goes, oh yeah, blah, 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 blah. I'm sure that Chase gets the same thing with Chip all the time. He goes, whoa, wait, what'd you say? I get that with Tony. All the time. I mean, he has such a depth of knowledge, and he's happy to share it with you. You just call him up and he'll give you answers. And then there's mine. You know me. Any Q&A?
What's Tony's phone number?
I don't know. I should give that out. The only reason I'm not going to give it out now is because he's working 16-hour days because he's got 2 hurricanes and he's working 8 hours on this one and 8 hours on that one. And he's putting together JV deals. Y'all know what a JV deal is? Joint ventures. And he's putting all, man, he is in hurricane mode. So he barely has time to answer my questions right now. So 4, 5, 6 months down the road, you can ask Tony questions. You can call me questions now. In 4 to 6 months, you can call him and ask Tony questions. He's in hurricane mode.
I actually have a question for the group. Is anybody down here in the Cape Coral area in Florida? Okay. See that. I got a job and I can't handle it.
By the way, if any of y'all are sitting at home and you wish you had some work to do, Stephen and his guys desperately need estimators. I mean, desperately. They have like, a couple thousand deals signed up or something, I heard, so. It gets bigger and bigger all the time, doesn't it? Yeah, they desperately need estimators. So if you guys want to do some work, I'm sure there's other guys in here that need estimators as well. Anyway, any questions and answers about estimating, or just, how about Fox News in general, or anything?
Just an observation, get your thoughts. During the entire conference, there have been some like little psychological tricks, not to say tricks, but to get people on your side, know you're professional and things like that. Just a small thought occurred to me. You were mentioning printing off 2 copies of your estimate, one for yourself,
my scope,
of course, your scope, excuse me, and then one for the
yeah, so that you can go ahead and give him, this is what I've arrived at, and let's strike the things that are illegitimate and unreasonable.
But I was just thinking, make the little extra effort, print it off on some nice paper, something with some cotton content. It just seems to give it a little bit more weight.
See, the fellows would never think about something like that.
That's a woman thing.
That's a woman thing. The guys would be like, oh, okay, never would have occurred to me.
Little perfume.
Because we're really pragmatic and, practical. I like it.
Do you have rate sheets?
What's that?
Do you have any rate sheets for the work that you would do for some?
Oh, so for appraisals, we're right in the sweet spot. There's people that charge more and people charge less. We keep our prices right in the sweet spot. So we're at $200 an hour for residential appraisals, $250 an hour for commercial, $300 an hour for large commercial. And the estimates made easy is $150 an hour. Most estimates are done right around $100. And we find that our typical estimate will raise somewhere around between $2,000 to $4,000 extra money over what you would have written yourself using our estimate. And it costs you $100.
Turnaround time?
So it's 3 to 5 days turnaround time. We can do 1 business day turnaround, but it's an extra $25 an hour, and that goes to the writer because they're the ones that are having to drop what they're doing to do the 1 business day turnaround. And Greg knows all about the 1 business day turnaround because his wife writes estimates for us, Heather, and then he's like, can you cook dinner? No, I've got these 1-day turnarounds I've got. So anyway, yes?
I just got a question about proper repair method. So if you've got 2 layers of comp shingles, whatever kind, and you've got some wind damage to a few of them that are scattered, can you repair those, or do you have to remove all the shingles and all the layers?
You can repair almost anything. A proper repair, though, done to industry standards and to best practices is a whole other question. So to be able to replace a given shingle in a set of field shingles, not only do you have to, especially if they're head-lapped. You all know what that is? Head-lapped? So the average shingle is 12 inches tall, but you have a 5-inch exposure. So 5 plus 5 is 10, so you have an extra 2 inches at the top that has another 4 nails or 6 nails in Dade County, right? So not only do you have four nails in the middle, but you have 4 nails at the top of the shingle that's underneath it. So it's what's called head-lapped at the top 2 inches. So not only do you have to remove with the bar those 4 nails to get that out, but you also have to remove the other 4 nails up at the top if it's head-lapped, if you have a 5-inch exposure like you're supposed to. That's the reason why it says to have a 5-inch exposure. 5 1/4 inch on laminate, 5-inch on 3-tab, right? Okay? So you're going to damage those other shingles while you're taking it off, and you're going to be manipulating other shingles, so you're going to have a 4 or 5 to 1 repair ratio for every shingle that you replace. With tile, you're going to have probably 2.5 to 3 to 1 because you're going to be damaging some tiles when you're taking out the old tile and putting in the new. So you have to include for breakage. So you want to make sure that when you're doing that. So for an example, almost all roofs are repairable. There are 10 things that makes a roof not repairable. It's in my book, so you need to know those 10 things, right? As long as you don't have one of those 10 things, and the shingle that's on there, you can get a shingle of like kind and quality, the same manufacturer, the same color, and you can put it in there, and it doesn't look like a patchwork quilt. Let's say that it does look like a patchwork quilt. So then go ahead and do the repair. Ask the homeowner, is this an acceptable repair to you? And when they say no, then what you do is you get a realtor who has a license in your state to come out and to do an evaluation. How much does this patchwork quilt roof repair diminish the value of this property? They have a license. They say it diminishes the value of the property $5,000. So has the insured been indemnified? No, they haven't. So they put that on their official letterhead that has their name, their realtor license number and everything. The diminished value is $5,000, and you take that and said, we've done the repair like you recommended. Let's say the shingles aren't available and they use ITEL, and they say, well, the closest shingle to that is the ICO 30-year laminate and driftwood color. And so you go get those and you put them on, and it doesn't match at all. I mean, it's not even close. It's not a, what's the phrase? Reasonably uniform appearance. Reasonably uniform appearance, right? Or in the matching states, it's not matching. But everywhere else, don't use the word matching. Okay. So you have the insured throw a fit. In Texas, we call it a wall-eyed fit. It's a fish. I don't know where they come up with that. So they thought, oh, walleye fit. This is unacceptable. My house didn't look like this before. I'm not going to accept that. And then most carriers, because you actually went ahead and did the repair, then they'll agree to a full replacement, many times. Take it to appraisal.
I mean, when you're driving around, could I just go up to somebody's house that has this patchwork roof, or would you run into like a statute of limitations?
If you want to knock on the door, then knock yourself out.
But would you run into if it had done 2 years previous?
It could be. You ask them.
Because I see a ton of that.
Ton of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, because the insurance they say everything can be repaired. Well, you know, a great many things can. If your car is in a fender bender, are you expecting them to total your car because it's in a fender bender? Of course not, because it is repairable. So we should recommend repairs where repairs can be done correctly, and if it can't be done correctly, then what do we recommend? Replacement. Simple as that. We're not recommending that you replace a roof that's repairable. I mean, if you have one broken tile on a roof and that profile and color is available, then you take out the broken one, you put the new one in, and you're done. Do we have to replace the whole roof? Of course not. No one's saying that we should do something like that. When a repair is reasonable, then we do a repair.
And we make sure that they don't take depreciation on repairs.
That's right. And that's in my book.
I hate to cut this short, but I know there's a lot of people here that also have to get on, for their planes and everything else.
I'll stay and answer questions after we've dismissed everybody.
First thing is, I want to know that, to let you know that if you want, we'll still be here for a little bit. The coaching program, if you want to be able to be on webinars, with people like you, people like